A former pro football player is pushing for the NFL to remove marijuana from its list of banned substances. Eugene Monroe spent 7 seasons in the NFL. He played for both the Jags and the Ravens.
Now he's an advocate for the use of marijuana in lieu of opioids. He joins us to talk about his mission. Eugene, great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So why does the NFL currently ban marijuana? I think for a lot of us it seems like this just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the policy's been in place for quite some time, and with all the advances and things we know about how cannabis can be useful, and the fact that many players, a high number of them, are actually using cannabis too. I mean, for that reason alone, the NFL needs to sort of look at what they're doing a bit differently. One, they're prescribing drugs that are very dangerous to its players. That, you know, we have players who leave the game and are addicted to opioid drugs, and that story really looks like what's going on with the rest of our country right now. And you know, cannabis doesn't have the same addictive nature that opioids do, and you know, some studies, like one out of the University of Michigan, have even shown cannabis being better at reducing pain than the opioid drugs that team doctors are prescribing.
Just so I'm clear, even if you are able to medically get marijuana in a state like California, for example, if you're in the NFL, it's still a no-go, right?
Yeah,
there's not
so
like a doctor's note exception.
It doesn't matter if you live in a state where it's legal, whether for medical or recreational use. The NFL's policy is what it is, and as a player who's testing, if it's in your system, you're responsible for it, regardless of you meeting with a doctor and getting a recommendation for it, even if so legally. The NFL bans it.
And so you've seen players who have become addicted to the opioids, OxyContin, or other things that they've been prescribed by team doctors. How common of a problem is that?
It's more common than you think, and unfortunately we hear about it really just in small spaces when a player with a big namesake has an issue and decides to come out and speak about it much later. But a lot of guys are suffering, and you know, abuse and addiction takes many different forms. So the NFL really has a chance to get their policies in place, and really that should have a trickle effect within the other sports organizations and the lower organizations like the college game too.
And so what's the counter argument coming from the NFL?
To our point now, there really isn't any, other than Goodell saying that you know, their doctors haven't advised them that this is the way to go. So we need that dialogue to be opened up in a way where players who are able to learn these things too, right? They know that the things the NFL preaches to them about cannabis aren't true. When I played, I've had coaches who sent emails out that with total propaganda information and bad science studies that were put together to scare people away from marijuana, when in fact the very things that the article detailed are things that cannabis plays a significant role in improving people's quality of life across the country. So we're really at a point now where you have issues with head trauma, and we do also know that cannabis can potentially prevent brain trauma, or at least help the brain recover much faster in the event of traumatic brain injury. And players have traumatic brain injuries almost every play in the NFL, particularly up front.
Now, you are involved in the commerce of cannabis as well, so this is a business now that is growing across the country. Do you find that the political wind is entirely at your back right now? Do you find that this is that the march toward legalization is still going on, or is the current administration, not as amenable to it as the previous one?
You know, there's more at play than simply to say that legalization alone is what's happening, because you have legalization, and behind that, the way that legalization is structured still seems to, one, leave people out that might be, you know, able to have opportunity working in the industry, right? Someone who's got a marijuana offense can't get a job because 19 years ago they were caught with half a joint or a bong. And now this industry that's growing rapidly and has a chance to, you know, feed families, people are pushed away. Also, you see a problem with minority participation in the industry, where people feel like they're shut out simply by how the framework of legalization is structuring these processes to award licenses to companies who vie for them. So while we have legalization happening in all of these states, behind it, we have issues in policy, we have issues also with law. Legalization happens and then people are still arrested. People are still sitting in jail in the state of Nevada while we have a legal marketplace. Those things need to change.
So that's interesting what you said. So you feel like a lot of minority potential entrepreneurs in this industry are being shut out and aren't getting a chance to participate in this new economy?
Well, it's very apparent, and I think that's highlighted looking just across the border in Maryland, where the minority class in Maryland has really been totally shut out, where they're almost not represented whatsoever in the industry. And now the state has remedied that by allowing a competition for more licenses where minorities will get a chance and more weight in their application. But systems like that should have been in place in the beginning. The playing field should have been level, and it's really not. And I hope that states that do have a chance to legalize upcoming do see what's happened in these states prior and can learn from those mistakes and make the playing field even so everyone has an opportunity.
And Maryland, I believe, is legal for medical. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does it make it hard as a business owner to operate when every state has different policies and it's such a patchwork, and then at the federal government it's still a banned substance?
Yeah, so it's certainly still a banned substance, and we certainly have to operate in full compliance and understand that at any moment, the tides can be turned. And it's very provincial as well. My business, GTI, operates in 8 states at the moment, and each state is very different. The business is essentially set up as its own entity everywhere, and it has to be that way because the state licensing and processes are different, and there's also no interstate commerce, so we can't send anything from any of our businesses across state lines.
And switching gears for a moment, Eugene, obviously there's been a lot of attention on players kneeling during the national anthem or staying in the locker room, various forms of personal protest. The NFL has weighed in on this one. Different teams are taking different approaches. What do you think?
The way that the NFL is handling this is a total debacle. It's a stronger display of some of the greater oppression that the NFL imposes on its players. They're simply exercising their rights to protest. And so, you see the NFL having a financial impact on that, and it's cracking down on it, which is extremely unfair. And I hope that the players are bold enough to continue to protest. That's the very nature of what they're doing.
And so your view is that the NFL's approach has basically been all about the money. They're reacting to the fact that revenues are down.
Absolutely. The NFL is still certainly growing. It's not a sport that's diminishing by any means. And they don't want any of these sort of blemishes in their record. They speak about protecting the shield. That's the message that they promote to the players, in a sense, brainwashing them to believe that the NFL's image is more important even than their own and what they stand for.
Now, you have a few children of your own. There are a lot of people looking at injuries from football. I'm just wondering, how would you feel about, you have a son, correct?
I do.
You do. How would you feel about your son playing football, given what we know about injuries long term? I mean, maybe he'd be one of the greats, right? But would you want him to play?
I spoke about this at length. There's so much we know about the game, and I love football. I can't really get away from it. And over the first 2 years after my retirement, I really fought whether or not I actually even miss playing the game. I love it. It was a part of my life every single day, and I understand what it's brought for my family and everyone who plays the game, the values and things that you're able to learn in that environment that, you can learn other places, but it's just a special sort of scenario. And for all of those things, I wouldn't let my son play. And my son has autism, so he's likely not on the path to play football anyway, but knowing that I could send my son or anyone else's child onto the field and guarantee brain damage, it's just a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Eugene, thank you so much. We really appreciate
Absolutely.
your thoughts on all these topics.
Thank you.
We'll have more Rising right after this.